Okay, that's the main event. But if there are questions,
what is that recording?
That recording is La Morena, which means the brunette, by a group called the Ilegales, a Dominican group.
What was that line?
Illegal. Yeah, okay. Thematically appropriate, I think. So, yeah, if there are, okay, go ahead. I saw your hand first.
Well, thank you, Steve, for coming. And is this on?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you for bringing these stories of your work, and thank you for doing the work you've been doing. You're very wrapped up in the minutia of the legalities and the forms and how to get people through this maze.
You have no idea.
I know.
Yeah.
I have some.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, what is your vision for what a humane immigration policy would look like?
Okay.
At
the risk of, well, certainly pissing off at least half of our population, my view of things is that movement is a human right. And I think I would be all for open borders. I mean, not that politically is likely to happen anytime soon or maybe ever. I mean, for hundreds of years, the history of this country, even though we have a very sort of schizophrenic attitude towards welcoming the stranger. On the one hand, the motto at the base of the Statue of Liberty, and we are a country of immigrants. You know, almost every. And by a show of hands, can I see how many people in this room identify as Indigenous or Native American? Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands. So, you know, we're all now or been generations earlier from somewhere else, but like maybe almost every country, maybe every country in the world, we feel like we don't want everybody from outside coming here. So I realize that my attitude is not in sync with political probability, but in my heart of hearts, I feel like people should be able to live wherever they want. Open borders. If that happened, I would definitely have to find another day job. So I hope I didn't disappoint you with that ideological answer. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. I saw your hand there. Oh, okay.
It's for our folks online.
Yeah.
For the viewers at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, thank you so much for pointing out, you know, the human side of this whole process from your point of view. It just brought back many memories. I came here from Germany on H-1B,
right,
and a work-based green card.
Right.
So, I mean, it wasn't anything as dramatic as being in prison, but going through this process.
Right.
I mean, the place I worked for, ultimately, there was something that felt like slavery, you know, just knowing that if you lose this job, you're out.
Right. Right.
And, you know, just that reality, even though it was a great job and I liked the people and everything, but just this reality, you know, if you lose your job for whatever reason, and it was a non-for-profit, they could just have gone bankrupt, you know, or something like that.
Yep.
Just that knowing you're out, that total dependency on this one situation just was very stressful.
Yeah. And timing is so much a factor in those cases, and even more so recently, because a lot of the system has slowed down. So that effect that you talk about of being in limbo and feeling like you're sort of, you know, a prisoner to the sponsorship or whatever, it's probably worse now on the whole. Yeah, it varies. Yes, Elaine.
I'm also sitting along from her. You could think that we're all immigrants, two in a row here.
Right.
Yes. But you reminded me of how uneven the system is, how white privilege or coming from the right country. When I applied to come from South Africa, I'd had a fiance visa, and then my fiance and I had broken up. 2 years later, he came out to South Africa. We got married, and the consul general in Cape Town said, "Hold on, I've heard your name before. You know, what happened to your romance?" Big joke. Then I had to fill out the forms, and one of the questions is, "Have you been arrested? Have you ever been jailed?" Well, I had been. And I was very worried about it. I'd been jailed in a student protest against the apartheid government.
Mm-hmm.
And I very anxiously, very nervously said to him, "Yes, is this, you know, does this ruin everything?" Yeah, I was found guilty. I was very briefly imprisoned. He said, "In your generation, if you weren't ever imprisoned, we'd count that against you."
Yeah, every now and then things go more benignly than you fear, which is an interesting thing. I mean, I have another story I could tell you about that. Let's see if I could do it really quickly. Had a husband and wife case. Wife was the U.S. citizen sponsor. Go to the interview, and the examiner, who has a thick Russian accent, it asks the clients a couple of questions, and the wife bursts into tears again. And the examiner says, "Well, why are you crying? What did I say?" And she says, "I'm just so nervous. I want him to get the green card," which you're allowed to be. You're allowed to be nervous. And the examiner said, "I'm not a monster." You know, so it was all fine. But, you know, both the examiner and the husband and me all like had to calm her down, you know, but different calming down than the other story. Sorry, go on. Someone else? Oh, here's a guy in the back.
Yes, for a couple of years, I've visited detainees at the Hudson County Jail, most of them coming from Honduras, Guatemala, or one of the other countries. And some of them were there over a year, and their prospects were very poor. And I got to some of the hearings in Manhattan when they were still holding them in person, and it was very grim. You know, they would come in shackles, and it's just an awful system. Since then, Hudson County, Essex County, and Bergen County have all stopped their contracts with ICE to detain. So I think the only facility left is in Elizabeth, and it's a private one.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, as tough as it is to handle a routine case sometimes for the clients, as I say, probably the worst situation for a client is they're in jail, which they usually don't want to be in. So yeah, I know it's bad, and that can happen. Yeah. Oh, we got another hand.
I hope this won't seem too impolite, but who pays you? And B,
who pays me?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
And B, on occasion, do you not run across a quote unquote bad person who really doesn't merit your care and concern?
No, I'm actually, thanks for the questions. I like the questions. Did you say impolite?
Yeah.
I mean, if they are, then you do you, man. Okay. No, I'm fine with it. Okay. So my clients pay me. Depends on the type of case I'm handling, who the clients are that pay me. If it's an employment-based case, generally the employer, and sometimes by rule, they have to be the one to pay me. In the old days, it could be either or. But, you know, if it's a family-based case, then the family pays me, you know, so it's the clients one way or the other. But as to your question, have I ever run across like a bad banana, as I've heard it described? Yes, you know, 28 years, for sure. But I mean, the vast majority, like a really high percentage, I like my clients. They're good people. Sometimes they're, way better than me. Not that unusual. But yeah, I mean, I've run across some things and they generate amusing stories too, of sort of attempted fraudulent behavior. I had a guy, all right, I'll just tell you one thing. I had a guy from Russia, I guess, thick Russian accent, many years ago, come to see me. It was a marriage-based case. He came to see me alone. I guess his fiance, or maybe it was his wife, wasn't there. He just came, which is fine. It was just a first consultation. And he said, his wife couldn't make it because she was disabled. She had problems with her back and stuff. And it was all right. So we're just talking. And I'm trying to get a feel for, is it, a solid case or whatever? And I said, your wife, what's her name? So I don't have to keep saying your wife. And he said, Catherine. No, Karen, and then so later, and then there was a pause. And I remember it was summer and there was a fan I had in my office and it got so quiet. You could hear the fan, both of us like, okay, and I was like, and then he said, these American names, couldn't remember his wife's name. And also when I asked, how did she, how did she hurt her back? He said, well, she got into an accident. I said, what kind of accident? And he said, there are accidents, So obviously we took our leave of each other. Was this a legit situation? I don't think so. I could give you 6 other stories about bad behavior. Maybe that wasn't the worst. There was another guy came to see me from another part of the world. His mother had U.S. citizenship. And he didn't have many options that anybody could do to legalize him and get him a green card. At one point, he says to me, could I marry my mother? I lost it a little. I said, no, that, for one thing, you'd have to change your name like for the rest of your life. And he said, it's just for the green card. And I said, no, and it took me like a day because I can be slow. It's like, just for the green. Oh, good. So it's not for sex. That's great. Yeah. So I'm sure I could think of others, but the answer is yes. 28 years. Not everybody's the same. Go ahead. Elaine, you already talked.
I'm wondering if you do pro bono or what the pro bono situation is like out there for people.
Yeah. Okay. I don't do pro bono because I can't afford to. I started by volunteering with a pro bono outfit, but I have to charge in order to, try to get income. But that said, I often work what's called low bono, like right now I'm handling a case. Is there a way to make sure that my wife doesn't see this? Anyway, so very simpatico client, distressed case. He's out of work, going to handle something, probably not charge like $800, do that for free. Every now and then, the way I handle cases, it seems like I'm billing pretty low. As a business person, I try not to do that. I try to be more like the business people I mentioned in my stories, but that's a little challenge too. But as far as legit pro bono, yeah, there are outfits. There's Catholic Community Services, as you may know, in Newark. There's American Friends Service Committee. There's HIAS in Manhattan. So there are, longstanding pro bono outfits. They tend to be overwhelmed. They have more people wanting them than they can handle. But there are pro bono outfits, like the one I apprenticed with in the beginning. Yeah.
And I think I see a question from Zia. Is that right, Zia?
Yes. I really wanted to talk about my immigration situation. We came here from England on a job transfer for my husband from London to New York. But after a few years, he had problems with his job and he was thinking of quitting it. And obviously the company at that stage couldn't sponsor him because he was starting to leave his job, leave his company. And then good old Ronald Reagan started amnesty. And he put out this amnesty thing that anybody who had lived in this country for a certain number of years and didn't have any major problems could get a green card. And that's how we got our green card. And now a lot of these Republican politicians want to be like Ronald Reagan, but they don't want to know about his amnesty business that he started. And that made the whole thing so much easier for us. We didn't have to go through any of those, the standing in lines for a variety of things. We did have to go back to London to have an interview at the embassy, but it was all kind of smooth running. And it was because of that amnesty law that he created. And of course, it's gone now. Nobody gets any amnesty. So I just wanted to bring that up, that Ronald Reagan was the one who did this. And nobody ever mentions that he was the one who gave amnesty to a lot of immigrants.
Right. Yeah. There are odd sort of currents that vary in the policy of the government across different administrations. And sometimes the Republican side of our government, Republican Party, ironically, at different times in history has been in some areas more pro-immigrant than the Democratic side. In general, certainly not these days. But those currents seem to really vary a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I see Janine. Janine, did you want to comment or question?
Yes, I have two questions. First, what are the criteria for incarceration? I mean, why are these people incarcerated and some people aren't? And the second question is, why do you consistently call this your day job? Is there some significance that we should know or about?
Yeah, right. Good. Okay. Thanks for both questions. Yeah. I don't know if you tuned in after the beginning when I addressed your second question, but this is, I don't actually have a great handle on the answer why I call it my day job, but it signals to me that, there's some part of me that is waiting for like NPR or somebody to, pick up on my storytelling chops and or improv, which is even less likely. And then, I get a call from eventually Hollywood, who, the Netflix special. So, there's part of me that's like, the stuff I do not during the week. There's obviously some tongue in cheek, I don't know, whatever, feeling that I'm waiting for my big break. And it's a little demented, frankly, Ginny. Okay, so your first question, why are people incarcerated? It varies. There are certain circumstances where if a person has been convicted of a certain number of types of crimes and they get they come to the attention, come to the radar of the immigration system, then it's mandatory detention. And then, if they have a court case, eventually they can try to defend themselves from deportation. So that's one type of thing. In the case of the client I called Gabriel, he had an old longstanding order of deportation because he had not shown up at a hearing. He was ordered deported in absentia. I think they didn't have his address. So that case was more complicated for me by the fact that I had to reopen the old immigration court proceedings and get the rescission, get the order of deportation rescinded. But it was because of that. And then he got picked up for jumping the turnstile in the New York subway, like years after his order of deportation. And the system saw him then and was required. So there are various detention rules. There are a lot of circumstances where there's not mandatory detention. Your garden variety person who overstays maybe a tourist visa, they're not going to be put into detention if they don't have a criminal history. They will be put into immigration proceedings in immigration court, but they'll be, they won't be detained while they're waiting for that to work itself out if they get picked up into the system. That's how I'd answer that.
Jill has had her hand up for some time. I think she should be recognized.
Go ahead, Jill.
Hi, Steve. I think you're a fantastic storyteller, and I hope you make your big dream come true. And also, in line with Elaine's question, we should be addressing why these people are being tortured and threatened and dragged into drug and sex stuff, and avoid them being sent back because their case wasn't recognized as good. Shouldn't we be looking into what's driving them to come here? I'd love to have open borders. I'm with you. But I also think there's something in the system that says to me that something has to be looked at down in these crazy countries, Honduras and all those people, that has that kind of society that is threatening innocent people and, killing them and dragging them to the United States to do sex and drugs. Shouldn't we be looking at that too? I mean, I'm all for open borders, but I think there's two sides to the story.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, part of the migration, impulse for people is what drives them to leave the place where they grew up, and they're more often than not, it's either dire or at least not very good conditions. So it is a global problem, and it's probably not enough to even talk about open borders. It's also, how do you improve living conditions for people around the world and even in the United States. I agree. I agree with the tenor of your question.
Also about climate migration. Have you, I guess you're not involved in that, but I'm sure that there'll be a whole unit of law dealing with climate migration. What are people's, what I mean, all the stuff that they need. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, just as you're talking, my only thought is oy vey.
Oy vey.
Yeah.
Listen, did you live in Westfield? Yes or no?
No, I never lived in Westfield.
Okay.
Although I have nothing against Westfield.
Okay, I knew a Steve Sklar from Westfield, so forget about that.
Okay, beware of invitations.
I'm over it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, good.
Steve, they are talking about modifying human rights law to include climate distress.
Okay.
And there's some groups, Harvard and Yale, and a whole group of university clinics is working on that to try and get some revision to the human rights law. But I was wondering, do you find sometimes I don't know if you deal with large employers, but a lot of times there's a very conservative movement that says, we shouldn't have immigrants. And then you turn around and all these people have immigrants doing their lawn and working in their homes. And it's kind of like, have we not been able to make the case that we're an aging society and we need younger people? Also during the pandemic, all these help wanted signs went up, whether that was a coalescing of the Trump, hatred speech that's actually sent a lot of people back, and caused them to leave the country. So we have a shortage of workers, and shouldn't we be welcoming immigrants?
Well, okay, that gets to a longer discussion, which I don't think we have time for. I mean, as far as my reaction to it, but suffice it to say, we're schizophrenic as a country, and maybe even individuals in our attitude. Some of the attitude is, I hear the phrase, immigration lawyer, our ears are sensitive to the phrase, they're taking our jobs. So there's a worldview economically that we have a zero-sum economy and that there's only so many jobs. And I disagree with that for reasons that I can't go into now because it would take too long. But that is a common feeling, you know, and if you feel that there are only so many jobs to go around and there's enough economic problems here, that fuels sort of xenophobic immigration policy. So, I mean, I agree with the sense of your question, but I think, you know, part of the answer politically is there is a view that it does not recognize that we benefit, as I believe we do, from foreign labor. That's the short answer that I have anyway.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. This is amazing, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with us. I think that we would just like to say a quick thank you together. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and sharing everything that you've shared. And